Hello and welcome to another video. We're going to do a continuation on the video where we kind of bootstrapped an initial sort of design and setup for our contacts application. So at this point, we need to do some config and some other stuff. We might get on with some actual code finally. If you haven't already watched the previous video, then I would say it's time to kind of go back and watch that. I'll try and put either a card on here or a link in the description to the previous one. So in the previous one, we kind of went over design and stuff of the project and the user flow, logging in and registering and stuff like that. All the way from a basic problem set, create a full stack contacts app using Express, React, and a database. We kind of dived into it. We kind of designed the idea of what we want, at least for the back end side of it. And then we're going to start kind of coding something up in this video. Again, we're going to be using Mongoose ORM. We're going to be using Express. And we're going to be basically building this out in JavaScript to start with. So first off, we need to think about, well, how are we going to set this up? We need to go in and either create or log into MongoDB. So MongoDB, log into your account or create an account. Log into your account. If you don't have an account, sign up. But at the moment, I'm going to be using my Google account. So it's just logging in. So for this, I'm going to make a new project. And what was we calling this project again? It's Express Contacts Backend. So Express Contacts Backend. So next, members. I'm going to be the only member for this moment, and create project. Now we've basically got this. We want to create a deployment, which is basically, you know, a database server ready to shove our data on. I'm not going to use any of the paid ones. Let's just go free for this. It's only a small sort of setup. And then we'll just literally create deployment. Oh, just realized it's added some sample data set, which I didn't really want it to do. So I'm going to cancel that for a minute. I want to redo this. I'm going to redo the creation of a new project because I don't really want a bunch of sample data in there. I think it's, so I'll call it contacts DB for now. Next, members, create project. And then we're going to do our deployment. But this time, I'm not going to choose like having some random data in there. That's going to mess things about. So, still want to go on the free set, cluster 0. Automate execute set. I don't want to add a sample data set. That just seems a bit pointless for this point. So let's create deployment. Connect cluster. Great stuff. Copy the username and password. Again, by the time this actual video is out, the connection string and the IP and everything's all going to change anyway. Choose a connection method. Hang on, no, I need to create a database user first, sorry, and then choose connection method. And then we'll click on driver. So at this point, we're going to use Mongoose. So we install Mongoose, which we've already got. And then we're just going to copy this connection string. At this point, we will be utilizing the same sort of thing that I've got in most of my ones where I just have bcrypt, JSON, web token, and Mongoose. So we're going to be using Mongoose, and I'm going to be basically doing a similar sort of thing as I did on some previous stuff. At least same sort of concept, different application. So let's say that we use a .env file. So let's go and make a new file in here for .env. Yeah. So new file .env. It's going to store a couple of things. I'm going to want a secret key. Button bash for the win. I'm going to want a database URL. And that's what this one's going to be. Okay. So now we've got a .env file with a database URL and the secret key. So I'm going to save that, close that off. Now the config is how we're going to actually kind of set up our MongoDB. We're going to need to get the .env file in. So we need a require. That's a funny require. Require. It's being awkward. Look at that. It's trying to be too helpful there. There we go. That was really weird and really awkward. We're going to require .env, and we're going to set up the config. Basically what we want first. Then we'll say module.exports equals, give it an object, and we want our secret key to be a process.env secret key. Then we're going to want to add database URL to be our process.env .db URL. Okay, so now we've got the configuration with our secret key and our database URL in it that pulls it from that .env file. Okay. So now we've got our config, we can kind of start thinking about what else we want to do. So I'm thinking in the index, let's go and see whether we can actually do a bit more than just printing something onto the screen. Yeah. So let's take a look. We're still running. So every time we save something, it runs it again. But what I want to do is I want to actually at least make like a basic Hello World Express application to start with. So let's say before we do that though, I'm going to actually do a little commit, updated config with my DB URL and secret. Yes, there we go. Next, I'm going to make this into like a Hello World Express, if you like, just something to get us started. So I'm going to need to require. Well, actually, before I start requiring and using the database side of things, I'm just going to do a const express is equal to require express. So that's pulling in the actual express thing itself. Then I'll say const app is equal to express. It's going to create our application. Const port is equal to either the process.env.port, or if there is no environment variable port, we'll say 5000. So this is good when we're actually sort of deploying this, because the actual deployment will probably have an environmental fail, so it may not want to work on 5000, maybe something else. So the next thing I want to do is app.use some middleware and express as a middleware called JSON, which allows us to decode and read requests that are sent in JSON format. If we don't have that, it will error when we try and sort of send anything to the API. Then finally, we want some sort of endpoint so we can just know that it's working. So app.get. So when we hit a get request on, let's just say /, we can go off and do something. So I'll just put a request response set there, make a little arrow function that does something, and send a response.json, and just pass in some sort of string like hello from Well, or in fact, I'm just going to say time to code. There we go. So I'll just send that to the. So now that we've got that, we can go up and say app.listen and tell it to listen on a certain port. And then what I want to do is I want to give it a little callback where when we know it's working, we can do a console.log, just saying basically, let's do some backticks. The server is running on the port, and then we'll add the actual port. And now, if it's working, we'll at least see something in the console. Okay. So let's save that. And now it says server is running on port 5000. Let's see if it's working. Let's go and hit localhost port 5000. Time to code. That's working. Let's zoom in. Look at that. Time to code. Let's reset that back to normal. So that's pretty cool. We now have a hello world, if you like. Sanity check smoke test for express API. Commit. Okay. So we've got a few more things that we're going to need to do. I'd like it to try and connect to Mongoose. So for this, I'm going to have to pull in a couple of things. I'm going to require my .env and then .config. I'm going to require Express, and I'm also going to require Mongoose. Okay. Now for Mongoose, we need to use the connect method. So what we're going to do is once we've got our app created and stuff, we're going to go, okay, what I want to do is mongoose.connect and connect to our config.db URL. Okay. Now that's going to connect, but then it returns us what we call a promise. So now I'm going to use a .then to chain a callback to happen after that to say, okay, if it works, I want to do a console.log and just say basically connected to MongoDB. Otherwise, I need to catch any exceptions that happen or errors. So I'll do a .catch, passing in the error. And basically, I'll just give a console error. So console.error, and that's basically like the console log, but to the errors, basically, specifically. So I'll say error connecting to MongoDB, and also kind of pass in the error itself as well. Okay, so literally we now have servers running and error config is not defined. Dun, dun, dun. Houston, we have a problem. It says config is not defined, and that's because we literally don't have config defined, do we? Okay, so we need to get the config somehow. We've got it set to require .env config, but we don't actually have the config object itself. And to do that, we need to actually import it, don't we? So const config equals require. We've got to do /config/config. Now we have the config to do that. And as you can see, restarting, server is running on port 5000 and it's connected to the MongoDB. How cool is that? It's working. So now that we know this is working, we're going to do another commit. Set up connection with MongoDB. Another little step towards some sort of application. That being said, there's a few ancillaries to build up now. So a couple of the things I want to do is work on the models. So, you know, like the user sort of schema and these things. So we go source, models, user. So we need to build this out. For this, we need to use Mongoose. So I'll say const Mongoose is equal to Mongoose const user schema is equal to a new Mongoose dot schema. And this takes an object. The object needs to describe the schema. Now, if we take a look at our actual README, we've actually got the schema kind of here, right? Username, string, required, unique, right? So I'm going to sort of make this a bit bigger. I'm going to drag this sort of over this side and start working on that. So let's have a look. So we want a username. We're going to need to give it an object with type. It's string. First, we want required. That's got to be true. And also unique is also true. Right, so that's our thing so far. Let's make this a bit bigger so we can kind of see it. Same thing with email, and then password is almost the same. So we can literally put a comma there. Let's copy that one and paste it, and then paste it again. So for this one, we want exactly the same sort of concept for that for the email. And for the password, we want almost exactly the same. So let's put the password. And we don't want the unique, because remember, passwords, if we start trying to say, no, it has to be unique, that could cause a problem for, like in, imagine you try and make a password that you know is your password. And it says, hey, yeah, no, someone else has that password. You're like, oh, so I could just start randomly putting in usernames or emails and keep putting in my password, and it's going to eventually hit on someone who's got the same password as me. So it's kind of thinking about, okay, that's not very good security, so we can't really be doing that. So that's fine. You can guarantee somebody else is going to be thinking about the same password as you at some point. Right, so that's fine, but now we need to export it so we've got access to it outside of this file. So we'll do module.exports equals mongoose.model. And the model is going to be a user model. And it's going to be connected to our user schema. And that's it. That's our user schema. That means that we now have a shape of our actual database, or at least the table or the data for the user. Now that we've done that, I want to do a similar thing with the contact, but first I'm going to make a commit. So user schema created. Commit. Next is going to be the contact schema. So it's going to kind of have this sort of shape to it. Yeah. So let's go and do that. Let's go over here. Close that. We've got the contact.js there. Actually, that can close off there. Great stuff. So similar sort of thing. We want const mongoose equals require mongoose. Const contact schema is equal to a new mongoose dot schema. Remember, this takes in an object. Oops. And again, this one's going to have like a slightly different thing. It's going to be a reference to the user table. So user is going to be type mongoose dot schema dot types dot object ID. Then it's going to be a reference to the user table. There we go. From here out, we have name, which is going to have a type string. It's also going to have a require of true. Then we've got the next lot are going to be basically just type string, apart from the last one we're going to have as an enum as well. So for now, we've got email. We want to do that. Type of string. Okay. Oh, forgot a comma there. Right, but now there's going to be a couple of these in the same sort of concept. So I'm going to copy that, paste a couple of times. Let's have a look. Telephone, address, and category. So let's do the telephone, which is also going to be pretty much the same. The address is also going to be the same. And now the next thing is going to be the category, which is going to be sort of the same, but we also want it to let it know that it's enum type. And it strictly allows it to have individual and also business. That's key value pair. And then we also say require and that's basically set up for that. So now we can export it. Module.exports equals mongoose .model. And then what we need to do is pass it the type, so contact, and then link it into our contact schema. There we go. So that kind of names that the contact model. Right, so now we've done the contact schema as well. So let's put that down. They'll commit there. Remember, commit often. Do a small unit of work and then commit. Make sure that you kind of get there and do the thing. Right, so we've got like 5 sets of changes to sync here. So why not? Let's go and sync those changes for now. So now that we've built out the models, we could think about a couple of things. We've got controllers, we've got routes. So I think next we're going to work on the controllers. Let's build out at least part of, let's try and get the register done at least. Let's try and do that. Build out the register and see whether we can get that working. So let's have a look at our controllers. We've got a user controller. So let's start building that up. Close that up. Well, actually, I should have kept the README open, actually. I just thought, let's do that. Yeah. Right, so did I actually make any controller piece here? No, we didn't actually. So I haven't actually documented that. I'll document those, I guess. So let's think about this. Let's go. What do we want? We need the user, the model, the user model itself. We need bcrypt, we need JWT, and we need config at this point. So I'll start with those. So const user equals require // models / user. That's grab the user model. Const bcrypt. And we're going to be using bcrypt to basically hash the password. Require bcrypt. Okay. Then we're going to want the JWT to create a JSON web token. So const JWT equals require JSON web token. And then lastly but not least, we're going to want the config so we can actually access some stuff like the secret. So const config equals require dot dot slash dot dot oops, dot dot slash config slash config. Oops. There we go. So next we're going to want the register functionality. So we'll say exports dot register equals, and it's going to be an async function, requires a res, and now this is going to be async, and this is going to be basically following the same concept as we did with our whimsical thing where we kind of planned it out up here somewhere. Get back up to the top. User controller res, and it's expecting a username, email, and password. Okay, so we kind of got our right up there as to what we want it to look like. So at this point, I can go, okay, in that case, let's try to do something. So we have like a little try catch block. So the first thing I want to do is extract the username, email, and password. Straight out of the request. Yeah, there's no typo, but that's fine. Equals request dot body. Thing that allows us to do this is that JSON middleware. Here I've got a little typo actually there. So we got, that's just pulling that request from, these pieces of data out of the request body. Then we'll say const existing user is equal to await user dot find one, passing it the email. Now, if one already exists, we want to let, this is an unhappy case. So we're now checking for the unhappy case first. So if existing user, so the user exists, then I'll return res.status. We want a status of 400 if that's the case. .json, passing it a message that the email already exists. Okay, and that's kind of satisfying in the registration flow. That's satisfying an unhappy case where everything's correctly sent, but user already exists. Basically, that's what that's kind of denoting, that sort of flow there. Yeah. Status 400 with a message user already exists, or email already exists in this situation. Yeah, so we're kind of going email for the username. Right, so that's for that lot. We still then need to do like a catch block and some other stuff, but let's continue on with this. So next we need to hash up the password. If we've got past this, we're a little bit closer to our happy state, in which case we can make a new const hashed password is equal to await bcrypt dot hash. We need to pass it the password. If we just pass it the password, it has some defaults, but I'm going to say 10 here, which is actually the salt rounds. I'm setting it to 10 at this point. Salt rounds are just like how many times it hashes it and encrypts it, basically. That's all. So now we want to make a new user. So const new user is equal to a new, funny enough, user, which can take in like an object, and we're going to pass in the username. We're going to pass in the email. And now for the password, we want to have the hashed password. Because remember, we don't want to be putting a plain text password into the database. Okay. Then we're going to try and save the user. So await user, sorry, new user even, new user dot save. I'm going to try and save it to the database. If this fails, it's going to throw an exception out here somewhere. But if it doesn't fail, then we can do a res.status 201, which is created. This is our happy state. So if we have a look at our workflow, it's the happy case. All info is correct, sent, and the user does not already exist. So it's going to respond with status 201, message user created successfully. So let's go and do that. So status 201.json is going to hold a message with user created successfully. Okay, so that's the happy state. Now, if it fails at this point, we are going to have like a server error, basically. So we're going to have this position where we end up with unhappy case. Basically, somehow it wasn't created. Some issues happened where it's not working, basically. So that's where we're going to do a catch. We're going to catch on an error. We'll do a res.status. And for this one, we've denoted we want a 500 status with a .json holding a object with a message of internal server error. Okay, so that concludes the register functionality inside our user control. So we'll save that. Now at this point, it's there. It can't really do anything just yet because we need to be able to call it somehow. But that's fine. Right now we're going to commit still. So added register to user controller. Remember, commit often. Okay, so now that we've got this register, let's go and try and see if we can kind of make it do something. We've got this register. We need to get some sort of a route to it. How do we get there? So we're going to work a little bit on the user route right now. So let's go over to the files and go over to our routes. Let's have a look at the user routes. We don't really have anything, but we need express. We need the express router, and we need access to the user controller. So const express is equal to wire express, and const router is equal to basically express.Router. And then const user controller is equal to require. Now we need to kind of give it /controllers / user controller. There we go. So let's give us the access to that. So now we need to say, hey, when I do a post request to /register, so if I say router.post, when I do a post request to an endpoint of /register, then what I want you to do is run user controller .register. That's basically it. That's going to say, okay, whenever I hit that endpoint, I want you to go and register, just run the registration thing. Now we need to have access to this router. So what we need to do is say module.exports equals router. There we go. We're going to add another route to this afterwards, but for now, let's just have this. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at this now. So where the only thing really we need to have this now to make it work is somehow add that route to the main sort of file. And we can use that with a use directive. Okay. So what we can do here is, let's say we know we've got our / route, but we need to kind of think about how can we use the other thing. So we're going to make an app.use, and routes are basically middleware of some sort. So we'll say app.use. We'll give this an endpoint of /API/users. That'll be the base address for the user routes. Now for this, we need to import the user routes. So let's go up here. Const user routes is equal to require ./src/routes/user routes. Save that. If all is saved correctly, we should have the message that we're running and I'm connected to MongoDB. Now what we're going to do, we should be able to use something like curl to actually hit our endpoint. So let's think, we want to do curl.exe. Let's try curl.exe --help. Basically, we've got data, we've got headers, we've got some other stuff. We've got a few different bits here. So what we want to do is we need to kind of tell it that we're going to do a post request. Okay. So we'll do curl.exe -x post. We're going to do a post request. Okay. We're going to post request and we need some headers. The headers we're giving it is going to be the content -type, letting it know that it's going to be application/JSON. Okay. Then we want some data. Now, the data is an interesting one. We need to kind of build out this sort of object. The only problem is in Windows, if we just do something like speech marks username, speech mark : speech marks, I don't know, Tom, and then speech marks, what was the other one? Email, let's say speech marks tom@gmail.com, and then we did speech marks password, speech marks : speech marks password 123, super secret password. Now, in Linux or Unix, this would work. This would be fine. The problem what we got is in Windows, these speech marks disappear. It ignores, it's kind of like it passes them and they don't exist anymore. So we have to escape them. So we have to put a / before every single speech mark in Windows curl. This can be a bit of a pain, but as long as you actually know that, then at least you can deal with it, if you know what I mean. Otherwise, you get weird errors that make no sense whatsoever. Okay. Let's give it a go and see what happens. Oh, sorry. You know what else we want? We'll need the actual URL. http://localhost:5000/API/users/register. User created successfully. How cool is that? So now that we know this is what it needs to look like, I'm going to literally copy this whole line. And then I'm going to go to my documentation, my README. And now we can kind of document testing. Test with curl in Windows. So to test it, we're just going to do that. Okay. That way we have some documentation of it working. Another thing we can do, we can go to our project, close that for a moment. Let's go to our database. Notice there's a little bit of activity happened here. Let's browse collections. We've got this test users collection, tom@gmail.com, and this hashed password. How cool is that? So that's definitely working with the MongoDB. Okay, so we've got another sort of step closer to the overall sort of thing. So now, again, let's make a commit. Registration. Okay, registration. Seriously, can't type there. Registration. registration working. Once I user registration working. That calls out, we've got a feature. We've got a registration feature now. Again, you'll be building out these different features along the way and sort of documenting what you're doing and how you're doing these things as you go. Right, I think that's long enough for that. I don't really want to do super long videos for this. I'm pretty sure we've done quite a decent bit of stuff. We can do more in the next video where we start adding more, maybe a login functionality, and do the same sort of thing as we did with our register, just the same sort of pattern, just for login instead. Okay, so this concludes the video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.